Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Just gonna give it a few minutes in case any folks are still joining us. So we're still gonna hang out a little bit longer, but we'll be starting soon. Just to remind you, you probably see that we're recording this session, and we're gonna be posting it on our Office of the Provost website later this week. So just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Like I said, starting in a few minutes, and thanks for being here. All right, I think we're officially on Cal Poly time, 211. Thanks again, everyone, for being here at the Panetta Congressional Internship Program Information Session. Appreciate you taking the time out of the busy Tuesday to join us. My name is Keegan Cobell. I'm the Communication Specialist for the Academic Affairs Division in the Office of the Provost. Glad to be here with you all today. We're talking about the Panetta Institute Congressional Internship, which is an opportunity for Cal Poly students to intern for a California congressional representative in Washington, D.C. in the fall. And we're really grateful to have our intern from 2021 here with us today, Desiree Nunez, who's going to tell us about her experiences over the last year. So with that, I'll hand it off to Desiree, and Desiree's going to chat with us for a little bit, and then there'll be should be plenty of time for questions. So we'll have her present and then open it up for Q&A. Desiree, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Keegan. Hi, everyone. My name is Desiree. Last year, so 2021, I was Cal Poly's representative to the Panetta Congressional Internship Program. And basically, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about like my experience, how it went for me, everything like that. And then I'm happy to take any questions as well. So essentially what the Panetta Institute is a public policy institute that works to kind of like grow the future leaders / people who are interested in politics at like the collegiate level. It's run by someone named Secretary Leon Panetta. He was the former director of the CIA. He also was the chief of staff to Bill Clinton. And what you probably know him best for was being the Secretary of Defense when Osama bin Laden was found and subsequently killed. So he's kind of a big name in politics for sure, and it's a pretty cool thing to get to meet him. And him and his wife, Sylvia, run this program where essentially one representative from each of the CSUs is brought to CSU Monterey Bay to do a 2-week intensive training course, followed by 11 weeks in Washington, D.C., interning for, like Keegan said, someone in the California delegation. So I'll talk a little bit about what happened for me in Monterey and then subsequently what happened for me in DC. So in Monterey, basically you're spending 2 weeks just kind of hearing from all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds, kind of soaking in as much knowledge as you can to prepare you for what is to come when you're in DC. So some of the highlights of the people that I heard from was the CEO of Oracle, the House parliamentarian, the chief of staff to the director of the CIA, as well as the CEO of the NAACP. So definitely like a lot of different opinions, different people, different professions coming in to speak to you, which was something that I was personally really grateful for. And I think that it helped me a lot when I eventually got to the Hill. And then immediately after that, the Panetta Institute will fly you out to DC for 11 weeks. They put you in a pretty nice hotel and you're very close to the Capitol and you can walk there. And basically what you'll be doing is being an intern for someone in the California delegation. what that meant for me, and obviously it changes depending on what office you're put in, but for me, it was assisting with pretty much anything the office needed. That included voicemails, phone calls, sometimes even researching legislation. I got to help with a lot of the big events that Congress does as a whole and kind of like assist with getting things ready for those sorts of things. Um, so yeah, definitely a very great experience. It was very cool to be in DC. It was very cool to be on the Hill. And as for the day to day, obviously, you're gonna spend most of your time in Congress, but things do pop up. And especially when Congress is in session or big pieces of legislation are being passed, the work can definitely get a lot more time consuming and a lot busier. But that was kind of the overall for me. Other than that, obviously, it was great to be in DC. There's a lot of really cool things to do. And it was great to meet people from other CSUs who were also interested in politics, also interested in government. And I would say that if that's anything that interests you, I would definitely recommend applying. So I can go ahead and take like any questions if anyone has any.
And we have a small group too, so if you have a question, feel free to just go ahead and unmute. Or if you'd prefer, you can put something in the chat and I can read it aloud as well.
Hi, I was just wondering if you had experience in government work before applying for the internship.
Yes, I did, but very minimally, and it is definitely not a requirement for this internship. I have obviously never worked at the federal level before. I hadn't even worked at the state level. I had only done things like locally in San Luis Obispo. Nevertheless, it was obviously a great experience, but it's definitely not necessary if you're interested in applying.
Thank you.
Desiree has a question in the chat for you. What's your major, Cal Poly?
Oh, I'm a poli-sci major. However, this is open to all majors. So if you're not a poli-sci major, don't worry.
Hey, hi. What would you say was one of your highlights from being at DC? Like one of them being like, I don't know, like something as entertainment, or like, I don't know, something that you do outside, and like one thing that you did inside.
Yeah, okay. I can think of three things. They're all a little bit different. I'll start with the most professional one, but when I was in DC, one of the big ticket items going on was the Build Back Better Act. And that was the president's bill, like a huge social spending bill that I actually got to code, which was really cool. So I was like in charge of like putting the bill together, putting together like all the codes for like the different sections of it. And it was pretty cool to see that like turn out on the floor, which was like something that I had done. So I was definitely very grateful for that. Um, One kind of not as professional experience, but still relating to the Hill overall, I did get to meet a lot of really cool people. Some of the names included were Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I got to meet Nancy Pelosi. So yeah, that was definitely kind of like a fun thing going on. But in terms of the day to day, obviously DC is so much fun. There's so many things that you can do, especially if you're interested in government, because there's so many institutions there that are just so important. One thing in particular that I remember is the first time that I visited the Lincoln Memorial, someone was like shooting a music video there, and I saw someone get booed off the Lincoln Memorial, which I feel like obviously you can never experience anywhere else. So it was pretty funny and also kind of cool to be there.
Thanks. Desiree, you mentioned coding a bill. Could you go into a little bit like more what that means exactly?
Yeah, so basically, like, there's different sections of every single bill, and they get pretty detailed and pretty minute. My job essentially was to go through and find every single kind of like difference between each like line of the bill and code that entirely. So that way, when the bill is taken to the floor, it's easier for people to kind of refer to the sections that they're either taking issue with or support, whichever one it may be. Um, so they kind of use those codes to like be able to follow along in the document. So I was in charge of basically summarizing it and then subsequently yeah, I was in charge of just putting it into like a coded type of like table of contents almost after I had summarized the whole thing.
Desiree, can you share with us upon arrival in DC, your orientation, or how many days was that? And were you partnered up with another intern, or just walk us through that process, please?
Yeah, definitely. So when you touch down in DC, you're taken straight to the hotel that you stay in with all the other Panetta interns. We had like a little bit of like a meeting with two of our they were called liaisons. They're basically just two people who have done the internship previously who kind of help you because they live in DC, so they can kind of guide you. We had a meeting with all of them, touched base with them, kind of talked to them about everything, but you kind of do hit the ground running for sure. So we flew in, I think it was either on a Saturday or a Sunday. Most people started work on Monday, so it definitely moves pretty fast paced. And in terms of like how I started, I was the only Panetta intern in my office. However, there were other interns just from like DC, like the general area, who were also there. However, there were some offices that were taking two Panetta interns, so it kind of just depends on where you got placed or who you were working with. But yeah, that was basically how I started. And in terms of like the onboarding process while I was starting at the office, it was pretty lax, honestly. I mean, there's nothing too crazy to say about it. You kind of go in, you get like a little badge, it's kind of cool, and then you can access anywhere in the Capitol, including like the building of the Capitol itself, as well as all the House buildings, all the Senate buildings. You get to access the tunnels underneath the Capitol, the subway underneath the Capitol. So there's a lot of really cool things that you get to do as a result of having this badge and having this opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you.
One in the chat for you, Desiree. How does it work with Cal Poly if you are not a poli-sci major? How would I get credit for courses I've missed, or would I have to add a year? Desiree, if you want to try that one first, and then we have folks from our office as well too, might be able to help as well.
Yeah, I can definitely start it off, but correct me if I'm wrong on anything. So you don't need to be a poli-sci major to apply for this program, and the credits that you get from the Institute are not necessarily poli-sci credit, so it will still go towards whatever major you are involved in. The exact process for that, I might need a little bit of help with, but basically what I know is that from the Institute, say you complete all the work, assuming you complete all the work and you do everything that you're asked, you will receive 5 letter grades. Those 5 letter grades correspond to 4 units each. So in total, you're getting 20 units from the program as a result of being there. So it's not really like you're taking a quarter off or anything like that. You will still be getting credit. And then in terms of applying that credit to Cal Poly, there's a whole like process that I went through for that in terms of like getting the exact classes to like transfer over and stuff like that. I transferred them all for poli-sci classes because I'm a poli-sci major, but I don't believe you need to do that. So I think that's how like the internship stays open for everyone.
I think also, Keegan, it would be, we keep in close communication with the registrar's office to talk about the student, to let them know, and then they advise us as well. So it's a good question and something we can certainly check into if you're not a poli-sci major, but certainly wouldn't want to deter you from not applying if you're not a poli-sci major.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, I do feel like in terms of like my process for getting things transferred and getting things to count, it wasn't difficult at all. And I know that the internship is open to all majors. So I wouldn't worry about like having to take an extra year or anything like that. I really don't think that would happen. I would just say like probably check it out ahead of time, but yeah, I don't think it should be like a hindrance to anyone applying. Oh, also, I saw a question in the chat. The internship does take place in the fall. Yes, it's from August to November.
Gail, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm a little confused. So let's say that I have to take like a physics class or a math class during the fall, and those are like the only times offered. And then if let's say put in the scenario that I go to the Panetta, like do the internship, so will I not have to take those classes anymore because like they're gonna be covered already by the class?
I don't think that the Panetta credit will cover any like hard sciences. However, I do think that they will cover any elective credit that you may need, or any sort of like, I think they can apply for GEs too. It just kind of depends on like what you need right now. But no, I mean, obviously you're not going to be doing too much like math and science out there. So I don't think they transfer for like things like that.
That's something too, a good question for some of our academic advisors as well. They know like the registration and course counting and things very well, especially those in the colleges with specific questions. So the person who's selected for this internship, we always work closely with their advising center as well as the office of the registrar to make things work for them there. But definitely questions that can be asked before you apply or anything like that as well. Speaking of application process, Desiree, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you learned about the Panetta internship and what you did to prepare to apply and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So the way that I learned about the internship was kind of similar to what we're doing right now. The previous intern from 2019 had came into one of my classes. Obviously, this was before COVID, and had told us a little bit about this internship. And as someone who is interested in government, interested in politics, it sounded very enticing to me. So I also attended an informational session kind of similar to this one and got more information about how to apply and how to go about it. And I can tell you a brief synopsis of what happens during the application process. So you start off by submitting some documents. They include an application form. You'll also submit a resume, a recently graded paper, as well as a 2-page like statement of interest as to like why you're applying and like why you want to be a part of this internship program. If your application is accepted, you move on to a panel interview where I think it was like 4 or 5 people who interview you. I had done mine over Zoom, but I know that in previous years it has been in person. And if you move on from the panel round, then you move to an interview with President Armstrong. At that point, I might be wrong on this, but I think it's 3 people who move forward to that level of the interview. And then from there, the actual candidate is chosen.
Yeah, it depends on the year, typically how many applications we get and things like that. But yeah, typically around 3 to 4 candidates will go to the final round of interviews with President Armstrong. And there's one final step where we submit our nominee to the Panetta Institute itself, and then they have to ultimately accept our nominee. But we've yet to have someone rejected by the Panetta Institute, which is a good sign.
Yeah, just to add on a little bit to that, completely forgot to say this, but after I was accepted by Cal Poly, I did have to interview with the Institute as well. But I was accepted, so it was like all good.
Question from Renee in the chat. Was there anything you wish you had known ahead of the time before the internship, or about the internship, excuse me?
Yeah, there were a lot of things I wish I knew ahead of time. The first one being kind of on a more like logistical level. I didn't know how much of this internship was covered by the Institute and covered by Cal Poly. It is definitely something that if you're worried about the financial aspect to it, it's not as bad as it may seem, considering that your flight is taken care of, your housing is taken care of. I know that Cal Poly also gives a bit of a reimbursement to whoever the intern is for just day-to-day expenses like food or transportation, things like that, as well as the Panettas give you a bit of a stipend as well, that you can spend month to month. So it was definitely something that I know when I was applying for internships on the Hill, the Panetta Institute internship definitely enticed me the most, because whereas with other congressional internships, you may be in charge of your own housing, you may be in charge of your own flights, the Panetta Institute takes care of a lot of that for you. So that was definitely something that I wish I knew going in, because I was definitely worried about the financial aspect of it, when in reality, I didn't need to be that worried about it. And another thing that I guess I would say, just like going into this, I was obviously a little nervous to be spending a quarter away from home, away from Cal Poly, kind of doing something new. I didn't know how well supported I would be through this process, both by Cal Poly and by the Panetta Institute. I feel like it was definitely very relieving to know that people were there for me and that I was kind of going to a new place, but with an actual group, if that makes sense, since there's 25 interns total. So it was nice to have that sense of like community, which I didn't know I was going to be able to build. So definitely a good thing that happened.
Thanks, Desiree. So there's a question in the chat about, can you apply as a fourth year if you're graduating in the spring, or would you have to be going into another year at Cal Poly? And I think I can take this one, but Anne, correct me if I'm wrong. You can apply if you're fourth year. You just, the fall quarter can't be your last quarter at Cal Poly. So as long as you're planning to come back for at least one other quarter, then you're able to apply. Do I have that right, Anne?
Yeah, not expected to graduate for spring 2023.
And then,
yeah, I also see one more question in the chat about like the day-to-day of the experience, and I can definitely speak to that. So for me, it was definitely a little bit different than previous years because of the pandemic. So I had like a couple days in person a week, a couple days virtual a week, and that was the case for a lot of people in my cohort. However, there were some people who were completely virtual and there were some people who were completely in person. It kind of just depends on what office you get placed with. There's no real way to tell until you get there. And hopefully by the time one of you gets to go, it will be different and hopefully everyone will be in person, but obviously I can't guarantee that. But in terms of like going into the office and being a part of like a congressional office, your day-to-day looks kind of just like whatever the office needs, and that can also depend on whether or not Congress is in session. So usually when Congress is not in session, the days are a little more relaxed. You don't really have as many pressing deadlines. However, when Congress is in session, everyone is, you know, game face on, and like there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done. There's a lot of stuff that needs to get done in particular offices as well. So my day to day when Congress was in session would look a lot like dealing with phone calls and dealing with voicemails from any constituents, as well as doing legislative research for my representative in terms of like looking into different specific aspects of like a variety of topics, honestly. And then in addition, I would also sometimes, not always, get to go as like the representative of my office to some briefings. So I got to see some pretty cool briefings as well from inside the house. Some of them included an artificial intelligence briefing, a cybersecurity briefing. I saw one on the power crisis in Lebanon. I also saw one about Hurricane Ida when that was going on at the time that I was there, and kind of like how the government is responding to it. And essentially what I would do is take notes on that and then write up a memo to report to my office about what happened, because sometimes they are too busy to attend those kinds of meetings. And then on top of that, kind of just in general, I also got to get coffee with a lot of people in my office. That's something that's very normal on the Hill, that people like to like meet up and get coffee at like the coffee shops in the Capitol and stuff like that, and kind of just chat. And everyone's very happy and eager to help you, especially when you're like at this level where you're kind of just getting your foot in the door. People definitely want to be there for you, and they will be there for you as long as you kind of make the effort to get to know them. And yeah, so that would be kind of like a day-to-day type thing. In addition to that, I also just helped with pretty much anything my office needed. So if they were setting up an event, I would be doing like moving the tables, things like that. If they needed help creating like binders for like a congressional delegation meeting, I would stuff those. Pretty much just whatever the office requires of you.
another question in the chat for you, Desiree. Do you have any choice over where you get placed? Or is it possible to be with someone who you might not agree with ideologically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can definitely speak to that. So in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. Basically, the Panetta Institute is going to take into account your political affiliation. If you identify as a Democrat, you are almost 100% not going to be placed with a Republican, and vice versa. However, like within the cohort, there were people who identified as moderate, and those people could kind of get placed either way. So if you say what you want and you say where you lean, you're not going to get placed with something that you don't agree with. However, that being said, you don't really get a choice as to who you are placed with. That's more up to the institute. And a lot of that is based on your policy interests. So when you are accepted, you give them your top 3 like most important policy interests to you. And that could be different for everybody. And I know that the institute kind of places you based on what you said you're interested in and where you would fit in terms of like representatives. And then in addition to that, there's one more factor that goes into it, and that is where you live or where you go to school. So if you're someone from the Bay Area, you might be placed with the Bay Area representative. If you're someone from San Diego, you might be placed with the San Diego representative, things like that. But none of that is a guarantee. The only guarantee I can say is that you won't get placed with someone you completely disagree with ideologically.
Another question for you. Oh, sorry, Desiree,
yeah.
I'll read it out for you. What were your policy interests, and what were some of the other areas of interest in your cohort?
Let me think. So I'm pretty sure for mine, I put that I was interested in science and technology policy, foreign affairs, and women's rights. As far as other interests in the cohort, there was a lot of healthcare interest. Oh, that was the other one I put. I put healthcare. Healthcare interest, transportation interest, abortion rights, LGBTQ rights. A lot of people were interested in foreign affairs, cybersecurity, pretty much anything you can think of, somebody was interested in it.
Thanks, Desiree. Yeah, thank you very much for the great answers. Anyone else have any questions about the experience, about the application process?
Yeah, I had a question about the application. I was looking through it and I saw that you need to submit a recently graded essay. I was wondering if there's any like specific content that they would be looking for or preferring for the application.
I can take that one. Typically, typically the reviewer is just like someone that shows your writing skills. I think we've gotten a lot of like political science papers, obviously. So something that shows an understanding of policy are things we usually see. Just how you form an argument, things like that. So again, like we said, there's no major requirement or anything. So it can really be a paper on anything. But just something you think shows your writing skills, ability to form arguments, things like that. I think are usually what the reviewers are looking for.
Great. Also, like how recent were they looking for?
I think within the past year is probably preferred, but I think there can be some wiggle room there as well. And then I know we say include professors' comments. Typically, we would ask for them, written on the paper themselves. But with the last 2 years and people being in virtual and hybrid situations and things, totally fine if the comments are in Canvas or some other learning management system as well. Those can be submitted separately as well. Desiree, might be a good thing to ask you. Do you recall what your paper was on in your application?
Yeah, I do. I can definitely tell you. So I had written a paper, I think it was my second year, on like government surveillance theories. So it was a little like poli-sci-esque or whatever, but it was a paper I was really proud of. And honestly, I think that's the best advice I can give in terms of what you should submit. Just submit something that you're proud of. It doesn't really need to be politically related or anything like that. Obviously it's great if it is, but if that can't happen, that's totally okay. I would just submit your best work, obviously, and put your best foot forward and submit something that like you can stand by and that you are proud to submit, I guess. But yeah, that was what I submitted. I don't remember exactly when I wrote it, and I don't remember if the comments were on the paper, so I'm sorry for that, but yeah, that's what I submitted.
Any other questions from anyone? I'll note again, we are recording this, so we're going to put it up on the Panetta Institute website on our our provost.calpoly.edu site that I put in the chat as well. So if you'd like to come back and review anything again. We also have on that site these same information sessions from the last two years. So we have one from former interns Christine Lamb and Iman Dayanabi as well. So some other perspectives as well. And also my colleague Anne, she is happy to take any questions as well via email. I'll put that in the chat also. And then I'll put my email in the chat too. You're welcome to reach out to me with questions. And yeah, and if there's no other